Good evening. They say evening here in India, in the afternoons of other countries. Anyway, I have a message from for Australian delegates. Tomorrow, after closing, please, all Australian members who go to the tour will meet outside Leadbeater Chambers at 9:45 a.m. with luggages to commence the tour in India. So tomorrow, Australian delegates, after the closing ceremony here, please meet outside LBC at
distraction. This time I would like to ask your attention for the fact that Marja and I and some others, Michiel, we are trying to boost the numbers of subscribers of 3 newsletters that you might like to receive. It is the Adyar newsletter, which is distributed by Marja, I think at least once or twice per month. It is the electronic version. Also, a very worthy newsletter is the one Michiel composes, The Elephants. Very worthy if you want to know about what is going on concerning the renovation project. And last but not least, the magazine I edit, Theosophy Forward, also distributes 4 times per year a newsletter. I have the lists here, so if you feel like subscribing, please come to me and I'll be most happy to note down your name. Also remember, if you want to unsubscribe, it's very easy. You just press the right button and you will never receive it again. So please come to me afterwards, after the, yes? Oh, the TOS newsletter. Oh, we have not rehearsed this one. Come on, Nancy, you do this one, please. Oh, of course.
Also to the list, I think it's on. If you would like to subscribe to the quarterly Theosophical Order of Service e-newsletter, you can do that too. And yesterday I left a clipboard over there that I forgot to collect. I have to see if it's over there for names. Thank you.
So in total, we talk about 4 newsletters, 3 plus 1. They're all worthy to receive. Please come to us and we'll fix it and have a pleasant afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to introduce to you the speaker of this afternoon, Brother José Foglia from Uruguay. He graduated in 1979 as a doctor from the Medical School of Montevideo, specializing in general surgery and chemotherapy. He also studied acupuncture and other health-related therapies. For 5 years, he taught biology and pathophysiology at the School of Nursing. Brother José Foglia joined the Theosophical Society in 1978 and became interested in the teaching of Jiddu Krishnamurti, whom he met on his trips to India. Following these visits, he decided to travel and learn about other cultures and ancient civilizations. Besides his medical studies, he dedicated his time to studying the link between the psyche and the body, graduating in psychoneuroendocrinology in 2011. He has published his monograph, The Neurophysiology of Meditation, and a book, Homo Lux. He will talk on the subject, the digital revolution, a challenge to the Theosophical Society. I kindly invite Brother José Foglia to address you.
Hello? It's working? Yeah? You listen to me? Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for inviting me to share with us my study. What I would like to share with you is 2 years ago in Venice, okay. 2 years ago, the Umberto Veronese Foundation organized a convention in Venice. 2 years ago was the digital revolution. So during 3 days, we will listen to many, many professors from all over the world, physicians, doctors, lawyers, politicians, economists, how the digital revolution will change our life and will change the whole world. So in a few years, all what we knew as we have as a world, our world, will change and we'll have a totally new world. And they call this the digital revolution. And what I want to share with you is this new world that is not in 20 years or 30 years, but perhaps in 5, 6 years we will have this new world. And how should the Theosophical Society respond to this new world? So, welcome to the future. Some years ago, we have a lot of trillions of bits of information in many computers, but this information was not totally useful. But since a few years ago, they started to use these bits of information, this big data, with algorithms. And working both together in a few years caused this digital revolution because all the information becomes very useful. So algorithm is a procedure to solving problems and how to use all this information. And all this information stored in the computer becomes immediately very useful for everybody. So this digital revolution is a total changing from mechanical or analog electronic technology to a digital technology. So many computers, smartphones, tablets, with internet, we are all the world connected with this big data on all this information immediately. But it's a paradox, because in the Middle Age, a few people can read and to write, and the other people cannot. So it was a very huge misinformation or no information. Okay? And now the paradox is that we have too many information, but we don't know which one is false and what is true. So many people are talking about that our time is the post-true. They call the post-true, because all the information we have in the journal, in television, in internet, perhaps it's true or perhaps it's not true. So the risk is to enter in another Middle Age, more darkest than we have before. So this is the risk. So all this big data that we can have, and we don't know if it's true or not true. The other things that makes the revolution is the touch to the screen. We touch something and we have a ticket for plane, or booking a hotel, or whatever information we want to do. Enter our account in the bank and do so many things that we can do with a smartphone. And we can do immediately. So that is changing our relationships, of course, but it's also a risk that we have virtual relationships. So we enter in a new world that is virtual, totally virtual. And that is changing. And it will change much more our brain and our behavior. Of course, it's very useful to have friends in Facebook, but we can have also friends that doesn't exist at all, that virtual. And we are very, very connected, but we are also very, very isolated also, because we don't share emotions. We share just ideas, thought, in a virtual world, in a virtual dimension. And when we have a feeling, we send an emotic. And if the heart, I love you, and it's a big heart, I love you very much. And we are changing to share emotions with a symbol, emotics. And that is our risk also, to be isolated. We are connected, and at the same time very isolated in our own world. Of course, that's the same with the country. All the countries will have more information what has happened in one way or another in our place. But our doing something to this country that we know that they need help. Many years ago, we didn't know. So we can say, okay, I don't know what's happened in this country. But now we know immediately what has happened. One example is IT. And they're waiting for AIDS now. The nations, they said they will help them, and they're waiting for help. Okay? So it's a very paradox what we are living right now, because we have a lot of information, but there is something that we don't have learned how to live in this new world. And one other things that we have to consider, that we are losing our privacy every day. And we are losing also our individual freedom every day. And what is worse, we are losing the capability of discernment, because all the information is synced for us, and others are synced for us, and we accept all this information without consider if this is false or this is true. One of the doctors who talked 2 years ago in Venice in this convention was a psychiatrist, neurologist, neuroscientist. And he told us there is already done a chip to put into the brain, and he said, well, now we can change thoughts, and we can change behaviors for another person, and we can change attitude, and so on. But the more interesting that via internet, we can do it if the person is in another continent. So imagine all this technology. Who will handle this technology? Who will control all this technology? Of course, it's a huge advancement for mankind, no? To change perhaps a brain that is working not good, and to change how to work in a correct way. But we can use it also in a very bad way. And this is the risk that we are right now, right here, to consider. A control for the whole mankind. But who will control this? So losing privacy, losing individual freedom, but also the capability of discernment. With all this information that we have every day, many, many hours during the whole day. The city will change also with every kind of sensors. So all the city will be new, different, controlled by all this digital technology. And also the cars. They tell us the car will have no driver, and we will talk to the car, say, please put me in that place, and then you go out and say, okay, go parking, and the car will go parking alone, or maybe we share with another passenger. So they will perhaps resolve the problem of the circulation, too many cars. And the cars, we will share cars. So also in this field, everything will change. Taxi now are changing by Uber, and so on, and so on, and so on. In business, also the technology is changing everything. And also in the medical field. The doctor, for example, when we receive the patients, before the nurses will make all the diagnosis. IBM is already done application they call Watson, and Watson can make the diagnosis faster and more exactly. For example, if a patient has a little thing in the skin, just a photo, Watson, and immediately Watson gives the diagnosis of this, what it has, faster. And many, many parts of the body, of course this is a metaphor, can be replaced by this digital technology. 70% or 80% perhaps of all the employment will disappear because robots will do this work. And robots are faster, they don't get ill, they don't have to pay a salary. But which is the place for the human being in all this new society controlled by robots? This is another question that we have to do. And all these technicians talk about artificial intelligence. And they say, well, don't worry, in the future, you will not need to make a choice or decision. The computer will do it faster and more accurately because it knows exactly what you want, what you like, what you need, and it will take the choice for you faster, and you don't need time to think about this. But think a little bit, artificial intelligence. If we can talk about an artificial intelligence. So what is intelligence? Here in our field, in the Theosophical Society, when we talk about intelligence, we talk about the absolute. Intelligence was never created. It's from the beginning. So the term artificial intelligence perhaps is not correct. And we must be very aware. We must be very aware about this, to not be confused that a computer can be intelligent. It's true that I think this year or last year, two computers started to change language. They are working together, two computers, and the technicians could not follow what both computer was talking about because they decide to change their language. So that happens also. But can we talk that they are intelligent? I don't think so. Because when we talk about intelligence, we talk about creation. Intelligence is to create something that doesn't exist before. Something totally new. The creation of the universe. There are two groups. Some groups say, well, there was a Big Bang, but before the Big Bang nothing existed before. And the other group said, well, no, the whole universe, everything has always existed. But both groups are talking about the same. Never, nothing, there are two words that are absolute, and everything, and always also they are absolute. Both positions comes to the same eternity. Big Bang, it appeared the universe 40,000 million years ago, more or less. Our planet 4,500 million years ago. That was our planet before. And life appeared 300, 600 years ago. From nothing. Was created life, or life has always existed? That is another question that we have to do. When we talk about creation, we can say a life matter appear in our planet. And here, in the beginning, 3,500 years ago, it takes a long time, 3,000 million years, to appear here in this period, Cambrico, in the Cambrico, a lot of new beings, an explosion of new beings. But the fish appears 500 years ago, 500 million years ago. Amphibious, the reptilian brain, 300 million years ago. The mammalian brain, 200 million years ago. Monkey, 40 million years ago. Big monkey, 20 million years ago. And our human brain, the Homo sapiens, 200 more or less, or 160,000 years ago. So it takes 3,600 million years that in our planet appear our brain. And let's see a little bit how our brain works, because it's the central part of our talk. I'm very sorry if it's a little bit boring subject, but we must know what we are. What we are. We are a nervous system, and the premise of this talk is that we are a nervous system. A nervous system who has a brain who processes the information in a totally different way. One brain, of course, it's only one brain. but we will talk that we have two brains, two hemispheres. One processes the information coming from the external environment in a very sequential, linear process. Looks like have many, many computers connected in serial computers, okay? Can have memories from memories, can process the information, can how do you say, can measure and can compare and can create value. Measure, compare, and create value. And it's very linear, it's logical, it's rational. It's here where the human being, the Homo sapiens brain, creates the verbal language because works with memories, metacognitions, meta-representations. It's the brain who becomes self-aware, becomes aware about itself as a being. So can measure, compare, identify the information stocked in memories, and all this information can identify in a center, and this center say I. I am here separated from you. The other brain instead cannot do this because works in an analog way. Looks like it has many computers connected in parallel. So all the information is processed in a totally different way. This brain can say future, tomorrow, yesterday, can think in future, can think in time. It's the brain who creates time. But in fact, this time is virtual because does exist only the present time, and this brain lives only in the present time. It's the brain who is creative, artist, connected with the emotions, connected with our heart. It has not many words, only a few, and with these few words can create a metaphor, a poetry. Yeah? But you cannot read a poetry with this logical brain because it will have no sense. So it's the brain who can codify emotions and can understand the emotions of the other, works with mirror cells, and is the brain who can have empathy. So two different processes, the same information coming into the brain are processed in two totally different ways. And both are connected with the corpus callosum, and both hemispheres can share, and they are sharing all the time the whole information. Both information comes to the prefrontal lobes, and then we can make conscious the whole information. But what happens with our brain? All these areas are processing the verbal language, the phonological loop. And we have created the verbal language. Before, our relationships was heart to heart, was an emotional relationships. And since 70,000, perhaps 50,000 years ago, we started to create this verbal language. And this verbal language was possible because the larynx of the Homo sapiens was more changed position, and the Homo sapiens was able to vocalize sounds. And with all the muscle from the mouth and the tongue can articulate words. And we started to create words. But the word is a virtual representation of a thing. And that is the important point, because this brain is the brain who can separate the object from the name. It's the brain who creates the duality. instead the other brain, it's not possible to live in the duality. He lives all the time in the oneness, in the unicity. He is in contact with the intelligence, so cannot be separated from the other, for the objects. The objects and the perception of the objects is one, is the same. Instead, in the phonological loop, we have the object and we have the name of the object, the duality. Monkeys, big monkeys, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, we appeared on the planet 200, more or less 160,000 years ago. And in a few years, we are becoming Homo digitalis, because everything is digitalis. This digital process in the left hemisphere becomes very, very important for us. And what's happened with the other part of the brain, we are losing the capability to share emotions, to share empathy, to have compassion. And that is what's happened now. We talk about creativity, but our activity becomes more mechanical. And we believe that we are creating, but we are repeating the same things. So what is life? That is one of the questions. What we are doing with life, with all this technology. We are changing the whole world, and we are destroying also the whole world. And with this digital technology, is causing a serious damage in our brain. We are very proud of this digital technology. It's very useful, but this digital technology is causing a serious damage in our brain. And one of the doctors who talked this is Dr. Manfred Spitzer. He's a psychiatrist from Germany, neuroscientist also. He wrote a book, Dementia Digitalis. This is Dr. Spitzer. I like very much this photo because here is a brain, two hands. That is a message. We can model our brain every instant in our life. And what is happening with this digital revolution, this digital technology is also modeling our brain, but not in a right way. He's causing a damage in our brain. And this multitasking, clicking all the time, is distracting our attention. So the consequences are low attention, low memory, low capability to take a decision, and so on and so on. Dependency also. So I will share with you some of this. You can find this also in internet, so I will say not longer what he say, but games can be addictive, less attention, deficit of memory, because everything you can find in Google, so you don't need to use your memory, to short-time memory, to long, short memory. We are losing our social skill because everything becomes virtual, and the new generations has serious difficulty to have relationships because this digital revolution is changing everything. But what is worse in the child, because our brain is a muscle, and we must to use our muscle. Of course, it's a metaphor. And if a child doesn't use his brain, when he arrives to adult, he will not develop short-time memory, long-time memory, the capability of attention, and he will have a serious deficit in the society. And that can bring depression, anxiety, aggressivity, and in the last term, suicide. So it's very important for the children to learn how to use the technology, but only 1 or 2 hours per day, no more. Because the damage that we can make in his brain can be for his whole life. he must learn how to use his brain. How learn to learn. It's a muscle. He must use this muscle. Dementia digitalis. All this you can find in internet, so I will go here very, very fast. Also, other doctors, pediatricians, are searching in this field, and they are talking, and they are giving an alarm what has happened to these new generations coming. Deficit of memory, and also can affect many, many parts of our life. So the abuse of technology can lead to dementia digital. This is another doctor I want to share with you, but he talked 100 years before, and he also said the same, that we can be the sculpture of our own brain. He was the first who talked of neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity is a word that we use now. At the time, now nobody talk about neuroplasticity. He was one of the first. Santiago Ramon y Cajal, a neuroscientist from Spain, he have the Nobel Prize, and that is what he said. Every man can, if so decides, become the sculptor of their own brain. The brain have neuroplasticity. Every instant in our life are modeling our brain. So neuroplasticity, the capability to reinventing our brain with our free will, with our central executive here in the prefrontal lobes. We decide how to do with our brain. And we can modify also the structure from our brain. Stimulate neurogenesis when focus in our activity. This area of the brain stimulates the neurogenesis, the synapse, the level of neurotransmitters, so it becomes more active. And this is what happens when we meditate for a long time. The prefrontal lobes increase neurogenesis, also the insula, and the brain become more smarter, more intelligent, more attention, more memory, can process more information, is more calm. So the brain who practice meditation also change his structure and also his functions. So, coming to the subject of our day, the digital revolution, a challenge to the Theosophical Society. What can we do with all these generations? And we see every day in the street. Every day we can see everywhere. In the restaurant, in the bar, a couple, a young man with a young girl, and both with the cellular. There is a totally, I don't say that he's indifferent, but he's away from what's happened around here. No? How we can approach to these young people in this new world that they are distracted by this digital technology. What has happened in the brain, that the digital process from the left hemisphere increases and decreases from the right hemisphere. And what's happened is what we're creating now in our mankind. We create a world of confusion, conflict, war, violence. We have a huge technology to destroy. The world totally polar in two different poles, one against the other, in religions, ideology, in thought. And it seems that we are not going to have peace. So, the contrary. It seems that we are going to have a big war. I hope so, not, but it's what it seems now. So how the Theosophical Society will respond to this new world? That is my question. Because this is not a challenge to the Theosophy. Theosophy has no challenge. The challenge is to the member of the Theosophical Society. Us, to the Theosophical Society. That is the true challenge, not the Theosophy. Our world now, very confused, very in conflict. The self-aware brain brings conflict with the thought. Because it's the conflict between what it is and what it should be, or in what it was, or in what it was have been, always in conflict. Thought is always in conflict because it's duality between the object and the name of the object. But it's very useful because with this verbal language, we have all this technology, the development of the science, and so on. We create this word, and that is very important. But it's not all. So should we continue with the that function here? You don't hear me? I'm sorry. Here is better? Yeah? No? Here, we can put it louder? No? Can you hear me now? It's better. Okay. I'm sorry. What? Should we continue with the 18th century language in this new world? I think we should create a new language, a scientific one, to explain all the wisdom that was written in many, many books in theosophy. But for these new generations, that is, I think, is our work, to create a new language, a universal language. Because the Theosophical Society, in this chaotic world, must continue to be a model of perfection, a lighthouse. A lighthouse. But this lighthouse must come to all these young people that are totally indifferent to all this knowledge. They don't read books, they don't read newspaper, they don't only read what's in the tablet or in the phone or in the internet, in the computer, and this multitasking gives information just a few here, another few here, and suddenly it's no more interesting. There are certain more information in our part, but they don't focus their attention for a long time because they don't have enough attention. The attention is a process. Consciousness is a process. Our neurogenesis, our neurons, our synapse, neurotransmitter, the brain becomes weaker and weaker because we don't use. So the Theosophical Society must be a model in this chaotic world. To educate new generations how to use their brain and to transmit all the wisdom. And many words that we use, perhaps, we must reconsider the meaning of the words. One of the words is consciousness. I hear this word many times during these 3 days. Also awareness, the word mind, psyche, self-awareness, self, the self, and the inner observer. I hear these words many, many times. but sometimes with different meaning. So we must reconsider all these words and to put these words a meaning. Because it's not have no sense to make a research. So let's go to research what consciousness is. We don't know what we want to say with the word consciousness, and we want to search what consciousness is. So first, we need to have every word with a meaning, and we must share the same meaning, so we can talk about the same subject. And that is the reason that perhaps some interpretation by the theosophists and also by scientists can be wrong. But I heard many times we have to delete ego, the self. We need an ego. The brain needs an ego, a very strong, structured ego. We need an ego. But the ego is not everything. It's just a little fragment. Our thought must be a very logical and rational structure. Our verbal language needs logic and a rational sequence. And that must be very clear in our verbal language. Now, our verbal language is just a tool. It's just a little fragment. But these little fragments must function very, very accurate. And also, scientists, the interpretation they are doing from matter, they are not considered the absolute. Most of them, they don't consider them absolute. Only a few parts of quantum physics are considered now an absolute. So we are in a very, very important part in our history as Homo sapiens, because the intellect goes very, very strong. The digital information, the digital process becomes very, very important, but we are losing contact with the other part of the brain, that is the whole brain, that is the empathic brain. So here, logical and creative. We have to integrate in the prefrontal lobes both processes. What is the challenge for us? The challenge is to transcendent motivation. Well, it's one of the challenges we have as mankind. Because motivation was very important 200 million years ago for the mammalian brain. Appears in the planet a brain who can make choice and can feel pleasure and displeasure. It's another brain, more interesting as the reptilian brain. And we have both the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain. But this motivation conditions our behavior, our choice, our thought. We must transcend the motivation. And to do what is correct and not to do what is not correct. Not just be conditioned by my motivation. We must transcend the motivation. And it's the intelligence who can transcend the motivation. To teach to the new generations the wisdom of the theosophy, this is also our challenge. To create a new culture. What means to create a new culture? All our culture in the whole history from the Homo sapiens were created with this digital brain. So now it's not to create a new paradigm. Now it's to create an education to consider the brain who is compassion and empathy. So it's not a new paradigm, it's a new education that we have to create to awake this intelligence that now is not considered by the digital process. And how to integrate both processes in the prefrontal lobes. Because that is possible. When we are using only the digital process, we cannot awake the compassion and empathy. But when we are integrate both process, we can have compassion, we with awareness, what is happening here and now, but we can also use the digital process, not the contrary. Yeah? So the education is how to live in the present time, to be aware each others in our emotions, and don't lose the capability to be logic and rational, because what we have done until now is to have a rational life, okay? And that permits to have irrational behaviors, okay? What we must to learn is to live in an irrational way. Irrational, that means not irrational, irrational way. That is dimension of love, that is no rational, and love has no motive, but to have a behavior very rational. Okay? That is our challenge. To create a culture of empathy and compassion, but don't lose the capability to be rational. We must to be rational every instant, to have a rational behavior. And the thought, to be very aware about the thought, but the thought is very powerful. And to be very aware what's happened with our thought, because we think that we are who is thinking, but it's not this the case of the brain. It's the phonological loops that is all the time making different thoughts. So we must be very aware about our thought. So the new culture to respond to this digital revolution is another revolution, a cultural revolution, the revolution of love. Revolution, a turn around, something that is not the consequence of an evolution that is totally new. And mankind, until today, has no live in a totally peace. We were always in war, in conflict. So this is our challenge, to create the revolution of love, to educate the new generations how to use their brain and what they are as human beings. Of course, it's very important, other subject from the theosophy, but to be very aware that we are nervous systems and we must to care these nervous systems very, very carefully. So integrate both process, logic, rational, and this creative process that is passion, love, artist, and is also in peace. It's all the time in peace because it's in conflict. It doesn't exist conflict for this brain because he's living all the time in the present time. And what is present is perfect, it's perfectly. It's what it is. The conflict is here. Who can think and can say, it's at least, but it should be like that. The conflict. Great. And that's what we have to do for the new generation, to teaching how to use both process to create a new era of peace and love. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Brother José Foglia, for the profound talk. We really have a big challenge. When all spiritual teachings point to the need to be aware of the now, to be attentive, all this use of technology points to distraction, to be out of the moment. And the new generations is going in this strongly in a dangerous way. For those who wants to go profound in these studies, Brother José Foglia will be the director of the School of Wisdom here in Adyar, starting in the 22nd of January to the 2nd of February. Thank you one more time, and this session is closed.